All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity Power Hour. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. You have two audio options to join from, computer audio or dialing in on the phone. To switch between the two, just click on the circle next to your preferred audio option in the audio section of your control panel. You also have the opportunity to submit text questions to our presenters today by typing your questions into the questions pane of your control panel. You can send your questions in at any time during the presentation. We will collect them and address them during the Q&A sessions after each speaker. I would now like to introduce Bradford Brand, CEO of Cybersecurity. Bradford, take it away.
Okay, Great. Excellent, thanks. Well, thank you for joining us for our inaugural Cybersecurity Power Hour. These are going to be monthly security briefings all throughout the nation, and we've got some terrific speakers lined up to basically educate you and debrief you on the latest threats that may be coming your way, and also best practices and solutions. So without further delay, because I know everyone's time is extremely valuable, I'm going to introduce Stephen Fullington. He's our head cyber guy here in the New York region. And Stephen, are you on?
Yep, I'm here, Brad.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to mute myself and I will give you the stage. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you so much for your service to our country.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate you describing me as the head cyber guy in the New York area. I feel like that's a promotion of a couple levels, but I'll take it.
Hey, I'm trying to give you some confidence there, which I don't think you need. You're all good. All right, take it away, my man.
Yep. So thank you, Brad, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And
this email compromise, so it's almost like we planned this thing out. I assure you, we plan these presentations out separately, but the truth is, email is and seems to always have been and always will be the primary way that bad guys are getting into our networks. So what Jules from Mimecast and myself, Jeff from Arctic Wolf, wanted to go over with you guys today was just how people are using email to weaponize it. How do we get to this state where that is the normal? From my perspective, how do we detect a phishing attack? So what does it look like once it's detonated in your environment? And then we'll leave off with a little bit about how Gartner suggests that we all approach email security, not just from a point product, but as an overall business approach. So kind of the how we got here and some of the numbers and facts behind why it's important to look at email security. You'll see the chart on the right displays that when the method of malware installation was known in this recent Verizon data breach investigation report, email, like I said, was the most common point of entry. And that's pretty important to know. And if you're going to spend money on securing your organization, you ought to spend it where the breaches are happening and where people are getting in. It's a pretty well-known, kind of understood fact, but these numbers from the Verizon data breach investigations report really help put really numbers to it and help us understand that this is where we should be spending our focus and our time when it's the delivery method for known data breaches from last year's report. 94% of them included email as the primary delivery method. So that's pretty telling. The Verizon Database Investigation Report is one of those reports that comes out every single year. And, C-level people, director-level people, you ought to be thinking about, I want to put efforts where the known threats are, the things that the FBI is talking about, the things that Mimecast and Arctic Wolf are seeing. These are where you want to focus your efforts. So talk a little bit about how we got to this point of email being weaponized and kind of we take it for granted these days that it just, we're just in this state. But phishing wasn't always a thing. It was a term that was coined actually in 1996 on an AOL message board. And can you advance the slide? I'm having a hard time here.
You okay, Jeff? Do you want me to step in here?
Yeah, go ahead. My thing just froze here. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem at all. So thanks very much for that. It's, as Jeff was saying, this is something that's been around for a while, but what we're actually seeing here is a universal situation. As Stephen made reference to earlier, great presentation, by the way, this is the first time we've ever seen something that appeals to everybody, whether you're in work, whether you're out of work, whether you're actually sat at home looking after the kids. It appeals to everybody. So this is a unique platform which we're seeing, but it's not just email. We're seeing a number of large attacks taking place, new domains being formed all around COVID and coronavirus, as Stephen mentioned. And he also made reference to the fact that it isn't just about the applications. They're important, but making sure your systems are connected, interconnected. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Because this new digital reality in which we're in has given us the three things which we normally concern ourselves about, and that's the dependency on these systems, the interdependency on things like Microsoft 365, and then the regulation of which we're trying to still maintain and corporate governance within. And then if you bring in the three chariots of doom with the human error, people clicking on the wrong links, people acting in a malicious way, both internally and externally, and then technology failure should it go wrong, and people switch to, say, sanctioned pieces of equipment and solutions to actually then continue to communicate, you're then in a possibility of seismic disruption. And that's really where we're seeing the issue come through today. There seems to be a lag on the slides, but the concern then is when you combine that with the issue we've actually got as regards to the global headcount and the lack of cybersecurity skills we've got out there, we're then reliant on our people being a little bit more diligent, if you like, because when you've got that skills gap which is affecting us all, and in a recent survey we asked how many solutions people have in place to combat these threats which are ever growing and increasing, especially in today's world, they've got anywhere between 40 and 75 different solutions. Now that takes a considerable amount of time to get it right, and in the survey only 50% of them agreed that they'd actually got it covered, and 54% said that they weren't confident on anything beyond even the most basic, simple cyber incident. And as I say, that's a big problem, a concern. The way we approach this, because we're talking about stats, facts, and everything else that's happening here, is we approach it in a different way. We looked at it from a perimeter base, moving it to a pervasive email security, and we call that email security 3.0. And what we mean by that is when you look at the perimeters and the traditional ways we approach this over the years, when we started out with Exchange and Notes, and now we're on Office 365 in the cloud, you need to look at the established perimeters. So that secure email gateway is absolutely essential. So is the advanced and targeted threat protection you need, and also the data loss prevention, because Steve made reference, they're after funds, they're after cash, they're after your particular IP within your organization, especially in pharmaceutical. So then you need to look at the insider protection there. Make sure that awareness training is actually done. Make sure you're looking at quarantining those suspicious files which are going out of your organization. Make sure you've got the DLP in place, and also look at how you then remediate from should something get in the organization, how quickly you can respond. But also think about the external presence here. There's two types of websites. There's those you own. You should definitely have your DMARC records established there to make sure you're in control of those. And those websites you don't own. And that's something we call brand exploit protect, where we're actually looking at sites which are registering domains similar to yours to try and dupe that supply chain. Again, great reference there, Stephen, in your talk track. And this is where you then turn to Arctic Wolf, where they can actually look at this from an interconnected system and then manage it all together for you as an extension to your SOC. Now, we allow APIs to actually interconnect with our solution, and I'll come on to that in a second. But when you look at your security operations center, you should have all these normal ones you've got in place. You've got your SIM, your SOAR, your firewalls, your DLP, your endpoint protection. And when we started out back in 2003, before cloud even became a term, we looked to do a number of things. One, we needed a resilient platform. Two, we needed easy to use and cheap to make it cost effective. So we built a multi-tenant community defense platform with a unique operating system. We call it MIME-OS, and we serve all of our solutions as we develop them over time. And we started to actually bring in new solutions, and we addressed various areas like data protection, web security. As I say, a lot of threats come on email, but you need to look at the website, awareness training, and then advanced threat intelligence. What we then do is look at how we can now integrate within your environment. And again, perfect reference there from me, Stephen, because we're looking at the API connections here and how we can actually then communicate from a platform perspective, being your web and email gateway, into those other solutions through APIs. That then gives us our single integrated suite architecture. And many of these API connections you can actually administer from Mimecast. And indeed, once you connect Mimecast to, say, your SIM, your SAW, you can then start looking at your normal SOC operations, and you get the visibility then of all the logs and feeds and intelligence coming through within your chosen environment. Now, that's Mimecast. That's enough of the selling. What we're trying to do here is create a strong security architecture, and that's allowing you through an integrated approach to protect data, strengthen your perimeter, detect faster, look at the vulnerabilities, and then respond quicker, allowing you to automate with that very important integration from your gateway through to your SIM for log and analytics, through to your SOAR for remediation. To look at it in a visual way, they're all the things we do. Why, if you see something at a gateway, wouldn't you notify your firewall? Why wouldn't you notify your endpoint, your SIM, your SAW, your ticketing system, your threat intelligence feeds you've got, just to really strengthen your cyber resilience within your environment? Looked at it in another way, Sally here, she's actually doing her work and remote worker, as we all are today, and the cyber attacker is looking at this, and Mimecast will do a decent job of protecting them across the email platforms. But the attacker does not give up. They'll try through various means, various methods of communication and protocols. They'll target your firewall, so on and so forth. And if those things aren't connected, that then leaves Sally very exposed. Again, looked at it in a different way, from an integrated approach. We see the attacks coming through, and we immediately notify everything within your estate. And that's where Arctic Wolf can come in as regards to running your SOC for you. Those are immediately protected, and Sally keeps on working. Jeff, back to you.
All right, and I'll have you advance the slides. I apologize for the earlier snafu there. So with the Verizon data breach investigation report, we kind of going back to that, you know, there wouldn't be a report if people weren't still getting hacked, if there still weren't data breaches. So at some point you have to understand the bad guys are going to get in. So what do we do about it? That's the big question. And that's where we come into play as an organization. That's why we wake up in the morning, and that's what we do. Go ahead and advance that, please. So we'll talk through a phishing attack and what it might look like to one of your users and what it might look like to us as folks that run a security operations center and monitor thousands of different customers through their both on-premise and cloud and right now work-from-home environments. So what you'll see here is a typical screenshot of a phishing email on the left, and it's made to look like it's a DocuSign. We all pretty much have seen this blue DocuSign email with an orange review document button. None of us would think twice about opening that if we were sent an email that was formatted in that way. And then what the bad guys are doing is they're going to send you not to DocuSign.com, but to what appears to be a convenient single sign-on. You know, if you're already logged into your Gmail account or your Microsoft account, it's super convenient to just click on, Google, for example, and then not have to type in a username and password. And so they're just relying on us working at light speed. I think since I've been working from home the last 2 months, I've probably been working 10 or 12 hours a day as opposed to 8 hours a day. So I'm just working more and faster. So I wouldn't think twice about clicking this. So that's the bad decision. Let's move on to the next slide and talk about, when we're talking about a security operations center, this is what it looks like from the perspective of a security analyst whose job it is to sniff out these sorts of bad behaviors that may get in. From the onset, there's a bad DNS entry here that is known to be malicious. And so this is a rule that's created that basically triggers a human-led investigation. And that's really important. We hear all this stuff about AI and machine learning, and there's so much value in those things. But at the end of the day, we're all people, and people are very important to the puzzle. So an Arctic Wolf, a human analyst, is going to go ahead and say, let's get to the bottom of what this is. There's an HTTP GET request, which is what your web browser does when it goes to a website. It's saying, get me the contents of this website. Of course, if it's getting contents of a malicious website, that's bad news. let's talk about how this, go ahead and advance it, Jules, how the red flag turns into an investigation. So the security analyst is going to see that. They're going to dig deeper, and digging deeper is essentially saying, I'm going to look at the traffic flows going on this system and outbound within a period of time, both before and after the red flag, to build a story, to build a picture. And these could be traffic flows going to this DocuSign phishing webpage. It could be other traffic flows, but I just want to see what's happening on surrounding the red flag. And that's part of the traffic capture. That's part of the agent that we deploy on systems. I think where a lot of traditional SIEM solutions fail is they don't really have a good, strong cloud or endpoint story, so they become relatively ineffective in a work-from-home environment. But anyway, we would do an investigation both before and after the event. Go ahead and advance it, Jules. And that investigation is going to help us see that not only was there an HTTP GET request to that DocuSign bad domain, fake domain, but there was also an HTTP post that was then made by the same user to that malicious domain. Now, when your browser posts information, that's essentially saying you're giving up information. So that what appeared to be a single sign-on to the end user was them actually putting in their Google username and password into that phishing website made to look like DocuSign. In other words, the bad guys just successfully conned the user into giving up their credentials. So that's how an attacker can then use those credentials, pivot, and log into the user's Gmail account, access their photos stored in the cloud, and essentially log in anywhere that person has the same credentials. So we're continuously seeing, unfortunately, these credential reuse issues. So that obviously that's a crisis if not handled appropriately. Next slide. What our analysts will do is then we'll go ahead and create an immediate critical ticket. That ticket is going to go to the user in the form of a web ticket, but we're also going to give a phone call, establish a war bridge, let the customer know that, hey, you were just compromised, your credentials were leaked, you need to reset them anywhere that they're in use. And by the way, don't reuse credentials because it's bad practice. Go ahead to the next slide, Jules, if you can. And if you could go to the Gartner slide, yeah, go ahead to the Gartner slide now. A little delay here, sorry folks. So when it comes to how to do email security as a big picture thing, and we'll wrap up here, according to Gartner, the email security market has begun to adopt what they call this continuous adaptive risk and trust assessment, or otherwise known as CARTA. And just last summer, Gartner published what they call their market guide to email security. And this CARTA mindset is in response to what we're seeing as a dissolving perimeter. As we all work from home, we're starting to see that what we knew as the perimeter is starting to fall to pieces. So CARTA is a strategic approach to security that balances security friction with transaction risk. And a key component of CARTA is continuous assessment of risk and trust. Both Mimecast and Arctic Wolf fall into line of that CARTA methodology. We understand that there's no perfect attack prevention, no perfect authentication, no such thing as an invulnerable application. So kind of in the futile pursuit of perfection, security infrastructure and processes have become constraining and cumbersome, slowing down the organization's ability to innovate. But this CARTA approach, if you haven't checked it out, you can Google Gartner space CARTA, and it talks about how to put everything that Jules and I have talked about into a systemic approach that you can actually follow in your organization. All right, next slide.
Nice one, Jeff.
Yep.
Bradford, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Can indeed now, yeah.
Okay, great. Just got a question here. Do you have an example of a recent, maybe interesting phishing attack that you guys have detected and responded to lately that you could share?
Yeah, so in early March, we were doing a deep dive into a customer's incidents over a 2-week period, just kind of looking at the big picture. And in this instance, it was discovered that an inbound email probing was going on. And the customer's Arctic Wolf sensor that we had deployed around the time frame of the shelter in place basically picked up and found out that their firewall logs there were issues with their firewall logs, and we discovered that there was recon going on, reconnaissance, and the bad actor was probing all of that customer's locations, including their overseas location, where it was discovered there was an SMTP rule in an old firewall that was overly promiscuous. In other words, it was open to more things than it should have been. Because of the data that we supplied, the customer was able to proactively change their perimeter rules to adjust for these probes that were happening in this upcoming phishing attack. So we actually took that and created rules that were passed back to our Arctic Wolf research and development team to assist with a new COVID-19 phishing rule because we suspected that we would be seeing this in other areas. So it was one customer's situation that we solved that we were then able to pass through to the rest of the customer base.
Okay, I've got another one here. Any big wins that you could share during this crazy crisis?
Yeah, I guess it seems that people have had more time to look at their security posture during a pandemic. Believe it or not, people are picking up the phone, and I'm getting more meetings now than ever, which is somewhat counterintuitive, but it makes sense. We're not spending time behind the windshield. We've been talking to customers more about their proactive security awareness for COVID-related phishing, applying more rigid browser policies, configuring, I think Jules mentioned trusted DNS resolvers, and hardening endpoint configurations. We're having these conversations with our customers just to show that there's value in what we do as a security operations company, even if an alert isn't going off, even if it's not, your hair is on fire. We're still having these discussions on overall posture, just leveraging our creativity and expertise, even when a bomb's not going off, essentially.
Unmute. We got one last one that we just shared with everyone. Someone has said they're worried about changing their email security provider at this time. What can you guys do to keep the flow going at 100%, being that we are, is there any kind of a drag or delay time?
It's an interesting one, that, because now is the time to change your email service provider. As people have settled down into this new work order, you need to look at how strong your resilience is, because people will get tired. They will click on that DocuSign, as Jeff pointed out. It's very easy to replicate those sort of standard email communications we all receive every day. So look at changing your email provider. There are certain vendors out there that are making big shifts in withdrawing from the market as well. And we've done nearly 40,000 organizations we've migrated over to our service, and we can handhold you through this if need be. Just speak to the representative if you do reach out. But yeah, we're used to this. It's in a very staged approach where we'll look at incoming email, then outgoing email. So we're very much used to this. But also, I do want to mention, and Jeff made reference to this, look at your awareness training as well. People will grow tired. Now we're at the second stage. Once people have now deployed and worked from home, now is the time to look at strengthening what you've got from a security perspective.
Okay.
And we can certainly help.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we're all working from home now. I mean, I guess I'm only protected by my router that is supplied by my cable company, and God knows, it's worth about $20. So I do very need to think about that email security, and who knows who's been breaching my stuff. But I thank you guys so very, very much for joining us. I look forward to you guys presenting in the future. And of course, to our audience that's listening, we have hundreds of people that are on. We'll share your contact information with all of them so that they can contact you if they want to, if they like what they see and they want to maybe engage and getting more protection that I think we all need at this point. All right.
Absolutely. No, thanks very much for the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to bring up Chris. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
You got it. Chris is the Chief Security Officer of Armor Cloud Security. He's going to be doing a discussion of a whole range of the latest cybersecurity concerns. So, Chris, let's rock and roll. And thank you again for joining us.
All right, perfect. Thank you guys for joining the webinar. As I wait for the slide to come up, quickly the agenda, and I'm going to try to make up some time here, is we're going to cover what COVID challenges everyone is seeing today, the types of risks. We'll briefly cover shared responsibility models, go over some best practices for general on-prem or legacy, and then some best practices directly related to SaaS and public cloud. And then we'll cover what happens in the event that your security controls may fail and you become breached. What are some important steps to take? First off, Armor, we are a threat detection and response company, a cloud security company that does threat detection and response, provides compliance outcomes, and our mission is to protect your applications and your data to keep you out of the news. So that's a little bit about what we do. Next slide. All right, a recent survey that happened right as COVID was kind of kicking off, right after March 12th. It was published in April. Talked to 150 senior leaders in the security space, most of them being executives. And it was interesting that 26% of them were seeing an increased attack early on with COVID. And we take this and we look at other research as well. I know Stephen talked about the IC3 and how they were seeing 2,000 COVID-themed events per day. We know that prior to COVID kicking off, IC3 was receiving about 1,000 complaints per day. And back in April, another source at the FBI had mentioned that they were at about 3,000 to 4,000 per day. So we're looking at a 400% increase in the number of incidents that were coming into IC3. A lot of them being COVID related, 2,000 of those. And at the same time, we also talk about Microsoft's threat intelligence, which comes from their security blog. And in that security blog, it was interesting. They don't talk about threat actors obviously just massively scaling up, right? They didn't just go buy a whole lot of servers. They didn't just, establish a brand new botnet during this time. The one tactic that did change for the threat actors is the keywords they were using. So depending upon the timing of it, it may have been the stimulus checks that Stephen was talking about. It may be in their phishing attacks, which is the primary point for threat actors to try to breach you. They may be talking more about COVID. And they're doing this to get a higher click rate. They're doing this to get a better footprint, and they are targeting your work from home because there is such an opportunity in that space. So with that, they didn't grow. They just reused their processes. So they have become 200 to 400% more effective by using these COVID lures and these triggers against your workforce. So that should be pretty scary to us. Back in April, according to this result, out of those 150, only 26% were actually seeing the increased attacks. But we know that between a 200 and 400% increase that the FBI is receiving, that we should probably be seeing more of these in our enterprise, and that should be a concerning fact for all of us. The majority of the executives that responded to this survey also said that they believe that this pandemic will alter the way that they do cybersecurity and evaluate risk in the next 5 years. I think as this pandemic has increased and continued to change the way that we do our business for our remote work, that this is going to stick around for much longer than 5 years. This is your new model, and you're going to have to stay in this model and make your risk practices, your security practices, your compliance practices fit the new methods in which you enable your remote workforce. So talking about some of the things we want to avoid, it was kind of touched on earlier. However, 51% of data breaches, according to the 2019 survey, 51% are the direct response of a threat actor breaching a system. The other 50% are from accidental cyber risk or traditional IT failures, system glitches, things like that. So what I want to really impress on everyone today is 50% of data breaches are caused by internal process or policy failures that you have direct influence over. So as you take a journey to mitigate your risk, the hacker in the hoodie is really important for 50%, but you're going to have a much better return rate on your investment if, for the accidental and the traditional business failures, that's where you're going to have a direct influence on it. The threat actors are always going to keep changing their mind and changing their tactics. It's your internal processes and procedures that you can make a significant impact on and change your risk profile today by modifying those. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that keeps being brought up is Zoom bombs. And so as we talk about like software as a service here or public cloud, the great disbursements happened. Your workforce is now remote, and it's debatable if they'll ever come back to on-prem. Some of you will be in a hybrid environment. Some of you will just adopt remote work entirely. But the systems that you're looking at today are not less secure today than they were yesterday. Like Zoom didn't become less secure during this pandemic. Some of their security vulnerabilities got brought to light and they got focused on and targeted on. But a lot of that was actually more on the meeting organizers for not setting passwords or sharing their credentials or things like that, about setting the posture of using that SaaS platform. And that same thing can apply to every other meeting. Microsoft Teams, if someone leaks that information out or doesn't set a password, right? You've got those same type of concerns on any SaaS platform or public cloud. It's your policy and educating your users on how to use the policies, the technologies that you're having to enable to allow your business to function today. So the landscape has changed. You will still have some of your on-prem or some of your legacy systems, but you will have had to have either expanded the access of that by changing your VPN profile, scaling that up, authorizing more users to use that platform, or you may be adopting a SaaS service, or you may be moving workloads to the public cloud. These have to happen for where we are working today. As you look to adopt either a SaaS platform, a PaaS SaaS platform, or an IaaS platform, there are certain things that you're still always going to be responsible for. So back in the day of on-prem legacy, you're responsible for not only the implementation, but also the risk from the guard at the front door all the way through the components in your application. You're responsible for that entire chain. As you move down the new service models, slowly these third-party vendors start taking some of that responsibility for not only the implementation, but also the security and the risk. So with IaaS, they take up all the way up to virtualization, and then you're just the OS and above. PaaS, it's a little bit more of that stack, and then SaaS is fully third-party aware. So this is a transference of risk, which I think is key to this migration that your companies may be going through as well. It's actually a huge positive to adopting these things, not only for their speed, but also for their transference of risk. I do want to caution that even though this data layer goes across all 4 segments, and in the SaaS platform, data appears to be a third party, you as the executive are always ultimately responsible for the safety of your data and your applications. Be it your selection of a SaaS vendor, it's your responsibility to do data classification and set the policies and the bounds of what data can be there, which is how you make these platforms secure. These platforms can be secure. It's your policy, your procedures, and your security awareness and end user training that makes them secure or not. Also, while you're evaluating these, don't just evaluate them on cost basis alone of saying, hey, if I go to AWS, the EC2 will be cheaper. Also think about the transference of risk and how that's going to impact your security operations. And potentially, it could take away some of your visibility if your teams are not prepared to ingest those type of logs or are familiar with that platform. Next slide. So we're going to get into some best practices here. Starting with general, these are legacy on-prem. Your group should already be doing these today, but I just want to reinforce these. If you don't have a cybersecurity program today, or if you do and you're ready to ask some questions about how effective they are, these are some general mitigations strategies that should be implemented already. So you should segment your network. As the guys before me had talked about, phishing is the primary entry point for threat actors today. And as they enter your system, they land on systems that are not their target. It's not the goal of their platform, of the threat actors, to land on a contractor's laptop or to land on a sales associate's workstation. So once they're on that network, on that one machine, they need to move. And this is where your network segmentation is going to make them work harder and make more mistakes. And this will also allow you to focus them into areas in which you will have heightened security and sensors to get to your other systems, and that will give you more opportunity to detect them in your network. Flat network here may be easy for network administration, but it's also a threat actor's best friend. The second thing that should already be in place today is identity and access management. How do you onboard a customer? How do you onboard a client? How do you onboard an employee? How do you onboard a contractor? All of these processes should be fully documented, and you should also, probably more importantly, have the deprovision process as well. So how often do you trigger a audit of your access? How do you deprovision that contractor who just left at 2 o'clock today? These are the systems that need to be in place no matter which platform you're in. Third, least privileged access. So it's probably the hardest one to implement because you're always going to have an executive or a board member who's going to say, hey, look, I need this taken off. I need to have admin on my workstation. However, don't do it. If you use your administrator credentials all day long, those are the ones that are going to be most susceptible to being intercepted or seen. So you should have least privilege on your laptops, and you should rarely use administrator logins. For context awareness, this gets into some pretty much the least privileged access, but taking it a step further with more granular controls, which says that even your administrator accounts should only be applicable to the target in which you're using it. So if you're going to go administer distribution groups in your email platform, have an admin login to do that. Don't use a super god admin account that could, deprovision your entire domain to do that one task. And last, visibility and analytics. If you adopt public cloud, you move your workloads to the public cloud, or you adopt a SaaS platform, it's mission critical that you get these logs and you get them back to your security folks to store those for investigations. You probably have a regulatory requirement or a compliance requirement to do so. But if you don't provide the visibility into these platforms for your security and your risk individuals, they're going to have a very hard time being able to keep you secure in those platforms. Now, when you adopt a SaaS platform or a cloud platform, there's very specific mitigation risks that you may want to ask about as well. The first thing is that you should always require multi-factor authentication. If the platform that you are evaluating or that you're wanting to move to doesn't offer you some way of securing your password, securing your login besides just a password, you should probably think again and move to a different platform. Dedicated administrator accounts, this is the least privileged access from previously. But what we've seen with helping cloud migrations is often they'll take their one IT admin guy, he'll start spinning up an AWS environment using his credentials, and then his account all of a sudden becomes the super user account, and he continues to use that. This is not a good strategy. Whether it be the first time you log into a SaaS platform or the first time you log into your public cloud, be sure you're using an account that's going to be made into a glass break account. It should be used to establish other accounts with reduced roles, which you will then use to manage these platforms. The third thing is user education and policy. So going back to the SaaS platforms are only as secure as the policies and procedures that you've wrapped around them and that your team uses. If you're not actually going in and being able to educate your users on what the bounds of your program are, it's going to be very difficult to keep these things secure. And I'm running out of time, so I will cover with admin recovery plan. If Sally and Nancy are both your dedicated administrators, if they both get locked out, you need to have a printed out copy of how you're going to contact your service provider and regain access to your environment. Don't overlook that step. And vendor management, be sure you're doing a security questionnaire to everybody that you onboard with the supply chain, and be sure that they have at least a SOC 2 Type 2 to prove the security effectiveness that they have in their organizations. we're going to skip this one. So the last topic that I want to cover in my time with you is if you happen to be breached, how are you going to respond? And the first thing should be, you should have an IRP. You should turn to page 1 and start there. And what that should be doing is setting up an incident response team. So who are you going to engage? And don't be afraid to engage your legal and your compliance group as early on as possible. Other groups that are essential, that are overlooked typically, would be your marketing for customer comms in the case any of this information gets out, and also your customer support teams to start prompting them in case any of your customers are affected. But whenever your investigation starts, whenever you're breached, be sure you're assembling a team that's already been predefined, and you're getting everybody in there, especially your risk folks who can highlight your obligations and your timelines that have already kicked off. Don't negotiate with your threat actors. It does not lend yourself to getting out of a situation any better, and it just causes them to become more aggressive. Do no harm. Be sure that the people you have working on these are actually skilled to do it. We've seen way too many forensic investigations where a good intentioned individual went in and just completely stomped all over all of the artifacts that were needed for the investigation, and it really hindered the outcomes. And then follow through. So be sure that you close the door behind you. Whenever you do get the RCA for how it happened, be sure you take the processes and put those into your policy, put in the technologies, put in the response to be sure that this doesn't happen to you again. Several media has covered how a victim of a ransomware attack paid it, or they recovered from it, and then a couple weeks later they got hit with the exact same thing. And then always be sure you're practicing. I think that's going to wrap it up. I'm just going to get to the Q&A slide, mainly because I'm out of time. But contact Armor. We are a security as a service provider. We can help you in your migrations or in your adoption of these platforms. We are here to help you, and we would love to have a conversation with you guys.
Chris, we have a couple of quick questions that you can probably tackle real quick.
Perfect.
Let's shoot this out to the audience. Kind of a broad-based question, but is there an average cost to a breach when it does happen, or is there a running average?
Yeah, so the cost of a breach keeps going up, and there's actual monetary value to it, not just brand reputation. But it looks like today, if you actually have records that are exfiltrated, you're looking at about a $4 million cost on average. If you're doing HIPAA records, medical records, you're looking at more of a 6.5, just due to the sensitivity of those. Now, some of the more, if you're talking like 50 million records, we've seen those go all the way up to around $400 million. So it really is about the size of your record set that was able to get out. So it's containment quick to keep those costs down. Okay,
we got one other quickie, and then I'll put up some contact information if people want to follow up with your team. Perfect. You shoot this out to the audience. This is a great question. What is the estimated investment that a business should plan for if they want to have a robust cybersecurity program? I know obviously different sized businesses have different sized budgets, but any way to from a small business, medium, and a large business, you can tackle that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting what we see. So the key word there is robust, right? So what's your definition of a robust cybersecurity? A lot of it will be what your risk appetite is as a company, which should be set by your board and your executives. The standard, just kind of guess if you've never done it before, is 10% of your IT budget, which ends up being about 1 to 2% of your overall budget. As the market kind of puts more of a focus on cybersecurity, we're expecting that budget to go up. But there's a lot of things that you can do to start your cybersecurity practice. And once you have those started, you'll start getting better metrics and better return on investment numbers. And you can help build a budget from there. So patching's free, processes are free, IRP is free. So go ahead and start your program with just using some headcount, and then from them start calculating a return on investment to figure out what your budget should be set at. But 10% of your IT budget is where we've typically seen that fall.
Great, all right, that's some really good insight. Hey, Chris, thank you so much. I just put up contact information for Lindsay on your team. I've shot it out to the audience. So if they got some follow-up questions, if they want to check out some of your services, they'll be able to go ahead and do that. But I do appreciate you sharing your experience with us, and very comprehensive a plan there. Thank you so much, Chris.
Perfect. Thank you, Bradford. Thank you, guys.
You got it. All right, our final speaker, folks, we still have quite a few hundred of you joining us, is one of our best speakers. Clint, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you today?
Good. Clint has spoken at quite a few cybersecurity summits and has been rated one of our best. He is not only extremely knowledgeable, but he is going to share vital complementary tools. And I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit, that actually taxpayer dollars have already financed, that you and the audience can use to protect your home business and commercial business. And he's going to run through some great slides, which of course will be shared. I've been getting a lot of questions. Will the slides be shared? Yes, the slides will be shared, except for the FBI slides, of course, but everyone else's information will be shared. So Clint, without further delay, thank you for joining us from the Department of Homeland Security, the CISA division, which I will let you go ahead and explain. Take care.
All right, thank you once again for allowing me to come and speak today. No pressure, obviously, is him saying that I'm one of the better speakers. Don't like that bullseye on my back, but my name is Clint Walker. I am the Region 4 Cybersecurity Advisor, or one of the Region 4 Cybersecurity Advisors now, as our program continues to grow. So I cover the Southeast United States. I understand that most of you might not be in my region, but I cover North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So in this day and age, it's not easy to do all of that, especially without travel. We're on home lockdown just like the rest of the country. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing, what's going on out there, and give you hopefully a little bit of an eye opener, and then kind of tag that with, what we offer or what we can do to assist you. I know that everybody loves to hear I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. So I am from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the newly formed agency underneath the Department of Homeland Security. For those of you who haven't been introduced to us, we are the nation's risk managers. So we are here to protect the federal networks, and then we're also here to protect critical infrastructure, state and local government networks as well. We are here to assist with anybody who needs assistance in emergency communications, infrastructure resiliency, and proactive cyber protection. When you really look at things, when 9/11 happened, the Department of Homeland Security was tasked with defending the homeland, with keeping another incident from happening, from looking at critical infrastructure and protecting it from adversaries. But what we found out when we first started looking at all of this is that 80% of critical infrastructure is not owned or operated by the federal government. If we look at the 16 sectors that are out there, as you can see, there we go. The 16 sectors, kind of cover everything that we do as a nation. And the federal government doesn't, 80% of that, we're not responsible for. We're not in charge of it. So how do you protect something that you don't have governing authority over? Well, the first thing is you could make regulations. So we could have regulated security. We could have told everybody, here's the minimum level of security that you must meet, both on the physical side and the cyber side, in order to do things. But believe it or not, the federal government does not like to be in the regulatory market. We don't like to do that. We don't find it very effective, especially for things that change as fast as physical and cyber security. So we took option B, which is the voluntary program. This is where we teach people how to do better security. We created the Protective Security Advisor Program, or what we call PSAs. PSAs are those people who go out and they teach guards, gates, guns. So they're the physical security element of our program. And this went over extremely well with our nation states. And so what we were looking at doing is we said, how can we take what we've already done on the physical security side? So currently there's over 177 physical security advisors throughout the United States. And how can we translate that over to the cybersecurity side? And so we created the Cybersecurity Advisor Program. I'm one of 22 people that currently reside in the United States that are doing cybersecurity. We're getting ready to increase that number by 77 by the end of next year, hopefully. Congress has already given us the budget to do so. And what we're here to do is exactly as our title states, we are advisors. We are here to assist you with your cybersecurity program. But why do we need to do that? What assistance do you need? Well, if you look at today's threat landscape, you can see that this is what's out there. I mean, we're looking at acts of terrorism. We're looking at cyber attacks. We're looking at extreme weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. We're looking at pandemics. We're looking at accidents and technical failures. All of these things, these are the threat list. It's been around for a long time. Some get more attention than others. I mean, before this happened, how many of you had run a pandemic playbook on your organization? You know, it's something we at DHS, we did quite a bit, actually, even leading up to this one, is we'd go to organizations and ask them, what would you do if you didn't have access to your facilities, or if a flu outbreak had hit your, IT staff, could you still function? How would you handle telework? All of that comes into play. Hindsight is 20/20 on that. But looking at all of these things, these all used to be separate buckets: terrorism, cyber attacks, extreme weather. But when you look at things more closely, you can see that the one thing all of these different threats have in common is that IT plays a role in each and every one of them. IT has become so integrated into our normal operations that every single one of these threats or these risks will impact your IT, which will impact your overall business operations. That's what we've come to find out over the last few years, is that no matter what the threat or what the risk is out there, it's going to have an IT impact. So let's talk about cyber. Let's talk about this new term. I guess it's not really new that much anymore. I started when it was called information security, and then we moved to IT security, and now we're called cyber security. It's been a transition because cyber is more than just what we think of as traditional IT. When we think about your home life, think about the things that you have in your home now. You have your Nest thermostats, you have your Ring doorbells, you have your televisions that will attach to the internet directly. You've got your computers, you've got your PlayStations, you've got your game devices, you've got tablets, you've got cell phones, you've got refrigerators now and washing machines. All of these things are now connected to your home network. All of these things are now beaconing out. All of these things are talking to other things. All of these things are giving you data or moving data from one place to another. We have all of these devices in our home. In your work, you have a whole IT staff that is updating, patching, and making sure all those devices are working normally. Who's doing that in your home life? Who's making sure that you've patched your Xbox, or that you've patched your tablet, or that your Ring doorbell is using the latest firmware version, or that something isn't communicating or beaconing to other things on your home network? In this day and age now, we say, okay, how many of you are working from home? Most of us these days are working from home. So we're putting our work laptops on these networks that have all of these devices, printers, scanners, and then they're all trying to talk to these things. And we said, okay, our VPN, that's what's going to protect us. But the VPN only protects the tunnel between the laptop and the home network, or the work network. Your home network is still wide open, or could still be a potential entry point for someone to jump onto your laptop or to look to see what else is going on. That's what we're looking at, is that today, everything talks to everything else. Cybersecurity is the foundation to how we do things. Money is the new currency, or data is the new currency. That's what we're looking at, is that everything could be a potential entry point into everything else. So you have to ask yourself, how are you targeted? Because don't fool yourself, you are being targeted. I mean, that's the whole point of phishing emails, is that they know that the weakest link is the person. They're going to target you at your home in order to get to your business. They're going to target your personal life in order to get to your business life. There's very little separation today. How many of you would trust that somebody in your organization is not using the same password they use for Facebook as their corporate password? That somebody could break into, TikTok or Facebook or some other application that they're using, find the password there, and then try and use it on your corporate network as well. That's what we're looking at, is that organizations, threat actors, nation states are looking at what you're posting in social networking, what you're posting on your resume, what you're doing with your life, and using that to try and get into your business world. They're trying to figure out who you know. They're trying to figure out what it actually is that you're doing. And they're trying to use all that information in order to get into either your personal finances or your information, or they're going to use it to get into your company. When I used to do pen testing, I used to always say that if social networking had existed back in those days, I'd have been king. I never attacked my target directly. I never came right at them and introduced myself to the person I really wanted to go after. I would always, what I called the Kevin Bacon attack, and I'd attack 7 degrees to the left. I would find out using, their resume or just trying to do research on the person, who they knew and who they were doing business with. And then I'd introduce myself to them and let them introduce me to the people that I really wanted to go after. And that's what we're looking at now, is that nobody's doing this by themselves. Everybody, as you've seen from the previous presentation, everybody relies on somebody else in order to do their cybersecurity. We all have vendors, we all have suppliers, we all have infrastructure providers, we all have public services that we rely on, whether those be, emergency management, police, fire department, it could be FBI, DHS. We're all in this together. And the bad guys or the threat actors are using that information or using those connections to try and get to us. And think about that. Think about how far cyber has come. We think typically of cyber as being information technology. Well, cyber has become more than information technology. That's why we changed the word of our discipline from information technology to cyber, is because now it's more IT and what we call operational technology, or OT. Everything from our building automation, think about HVAC systems, elevator systems, badge access systems, camera systems, door locks. These are all things that are now operational technologies that are now riding over our IT backbone. Operational technology, the security behind it was that it was always standalone, self-contained systems. But now we've actually integrated them with our automation, with our IT systems. We've taken the one security aspect these things have, and we've integrated it with our IT. Think about transportation. Think about all the automation that goes into your car now. Think about everything that goes on there, all the things that it does for you. It used to be that a person with a wrench could go out and start working on their car. Now you almost need a computer degree in order to fully look at your car, see everything that it's going to be able to do. Think about our healthcare industry. Think about the Internet of Things, all the things that are attached to the network now. X-ray machines, life support systems. Think about a threat actor being able to put ransomware on a life support system, or to be able to stop a healthcare company from being able to access health data records, or be able to block pharmacy calls or things like that. Think about the production, water treatment plants, power plants. Think about all these industrial control systems that are now riding as part of our information technology backbone. The threat actors have seen all this. The threat actors have seen everything that we're doing, and they're targeting OT and IT integration points. I always like to use this. Back when I was doing auditing for the Department of Defense, one of the first audits I ever did was an Air Force base. And when I was going around, I noticed that they still had a lot of Windows 95 or Windows 98 machines on their network. This is several years back, but even then, those machines were end of life. And I always said to the commander, I said, you know what, you've got a lot of end of life machines out there. I was like, we really need to get those off the network. They present a considerable security risk. And he looked at me and he said, you know what year the F-16 was built? And I said, I think it was built back in the 1960s. And he said, around there, and yes. He's like, those Windows 98 machines are the only thing that we have that'll still talk to those old birds. And if I want to put those birds in the sky and drop bombs on bad guys, I have to have these machines. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the fact that with operational technology, you're not buying something that you replace in 3 to 4 years like we do with IT equipment. You're buying something that is, a 30 or 40, maybe 50-year investment. You don't go out and buy a new elevator every couple of years or buy a new HVAC system. No, these are large purchases that are going to be on your network for a long time, and sometimes you need legacy systems to be able to talk to them. How is your network segmented so that you're integrating these operational technologies with your information technologies? When we go in as DHS and do assessments on organizations, what we find a lot of the times is that their IT shop is only doing IT security. Their physical security or their facility security is supposed to be doing their OT security. And OT, or those other groups, always say, well, OT is being handled by IT, and IT is like, well, we're not really doing it. So what we find a lot of the times is that nobody's really looking at or monitoring their OT systems to see if the bad guys are there, or if threat actors are taking advantage of these integration points. I mean, just think about the target hack through the HVAC system. That's what we're looking at here, is do you really know every little coffee pot that's connected to the internet, every little picture frame or thumb drive in your organization? Do you really know where everything's plugged in, what everything's doing, from your HVAC systems to your badge access systems, all the new IP cameras you're putting out there? Have you really looked at a comprehensive, in-depth cybersecurity program? Is your physical security team, facilities teams, and your IT security teams all working together? Which brings us to the point of this, which is teleconference security. We've now all been put in a situation where we have to do, we've already seen the threats. The FBI and other groups have pointed them out today. We've seen the targets that are going on out there. We've been forced to work remotely. We've been forced to be able to integrate, or it's just the wave of the future with us being able to hold virtual meetings and stuff like that. But the bad guys or the threat actors already know this. They're going to target us with, fake websites. They're going to target us with, download this, in order to get in the conference, or do this, So make sure that you're looking at your teleconference security. Make sure that you understand what information is going to be presented, at the meeting. What are you going to talk about? Who really needs to be there? Only use approved tools in order to get the meeting set up. If somebody else is inviting you something, make sure that you understand what you're being asked to discuss at that meeting. Make sure that the link is correct, or that you're expecting somebody to invite you to a meeting. Make sure that the meeting is secure. Lock it down to only the attendees that you require to be there. Make sure that you have a way for people to discuss things. Make sure everybody knows whether you're recording what's going on, or what the policy is around keeping text messages that are part of the meeting. Manage your screen sharing. Look at what you're going to be doing. If it's somebody else is hosting the meeting and you're talking about intellectual property that you have, maybe they're keeping that recording, or they're going to have all that text messaging. Make sure that the type of data that you're talking about or that you're sending through those meeting things actually meets the requirements of what you're doing. Don't reveal any information unintentionally. Consider your surroundings. Are you sitting, you've all seen the pictures where somebody's sitting and behind them is the nice password for the day, for whatever, for their secure communications or something like that. Make sure that you've sanitized the work area or the meeting area so that you know what's going on. The threat actors are currently targeting teleconferences. They're targeting VPNs. They're targeting all the things that we need in order to keep business going right now during this pandemic. They understand that a lot of us have had to increase capacity on our VPNs or our teleconference. A lot of organizations I've worked with already in the past couple of months, they were prepared for 20% or 30% of their workforce to be able to connect through VPN, and suddenly they needed 80 or 90% to be able to connect. How fast did they scale? When they scaled things that quickly, did they do it securely, or did they just get it up and running so they could say business was resuming as normal? That's the mentality you have to get yourself through today. Are you just business running, or are you business running securely? That's what we really need to focus on these days, is that we need to do things quickly, we need to do things resiliently, but we need to do it securely at the same time. Because like I said, we're all in this together. We're all linked together in some capacity. We are a supply chain of information. We are here to assist each other. We have vendors, we have suppliers, we have, transportation, especially over data communication channels. We have cloud security, or we have cloud devices. In some way or fashion, we rely upon other people that are not under our control in order to get security done. We have our cloud providing security for us, or we hope they're providing security for us. We have, our business vendors. We have people who are going to be accessing our network. We have, contractors. We have all of these people coming together. Are we really all on the same page? Are we all exercising? As a lot of the other speakers have talked about today, the one thing that I can tell you, if you take nothing else away from what I talk about today, you need to exercise your cybersecurity program. You need to exercise it in as many ways as possible. All those risks that I showed you at the beginning of this, what is your cyber plan for a terrorist attack? What is your cyber plan for a pandemic? What is your cyber plan for extreme weather? You know, wherever you live, is it an ice storm? Is it a snowstorm? Is it a hurricane? Is it a tornado? You need to make sure you're exercising. You need to do it internally, but you also need to do it with your supply chain. You need to talk about your power provider, your generator provider. You need to talk about your, you know, vendors, your suppliers. Are you bringing them to the table when you're doing your cybersecurity exercises? Are you bringing physical security and facilities in? Are you all on the same page? Are you all speaking the same language? That's what we're looking at. I mean, just think about it. Think about Target, the HVAC security issue they had with their breach. Equifax with a third-party software flaw. Verizon was flawed analytical software. The Paradise Papers, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Paradise Papers, I do highly suggest that you look that up, maybe do a little reading on it. You know, this was an organization or a group of threat actors who didn't go against companies directly. They knew that their lawyers would be the ones that would file any intellectual property, or would file anything to do with financial earnings and things like that. So they actually targeted the law firms, and the law firms didn't have as robust cybersecurity, but had all the same intellectual property that the main company itself had. So that's a fascinating discussion right there. Look at Domino's Pizza in Australia, where they had a partner that did all of their online ordering for them. They moved to another vendor, so they no longer did business with that particular vendor anymore. But that vendor never got rid of their data. So that vendor got hacked and all that data got stolen, but Domino's Pizza was held responsible because the customers gave Domino's their information. Domino's should have ensured that even when they terminated the contract, that all that data was either secured or destroyed. So Domino's was held liable for that. That's what we're looking at here. Sometimes you don't control your own security. It's still your information. It's still your responsibility. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have full control of what's going on. You need to make sure that when you're looking at contracts, when you're looking at, you know, discussions with your vendors and your suppliers, that you're discussing security, that security is at the forefront. The operational mission is still there, but how are you going to do it securely? How are you going to protect yourself in the contract language? Are security requirements spelled out? Who is responsible for what? For those of you using cloud-based, you know, items, do you really know who is responsible for the security of that? How is security being performed? If an incident does happen, who's going to take the lead on investigation? Are you allowed to do forensics on the cloud stuff? Will they provide things to the FBI or to DHS? How are you going to handle this as an incident? Who is allowed to declare something an incident? Is it them or is it you? How are those discussion channels going to happen? Because that's what we're looking at with supply chain. There's so much to cover. There's software service providers, outside contractors. In this day and age, we're talking about telework. We're talking about scaling all that up. You know, we're talking about mergers and acquisitions. We're talking about outsourcing. You know, if you're getting ready to move something to a cloud, you know, whether it be Office 365 or it's going to be Amazon, don't you think the threat actors are going to be aware of that? And they're going to start targeting special phishing emails or websites to try and get your users to click on those things? We're looking at physical components embedded in devices. Do you really know where you're buying those things from? Are you just heading out to Best Buy or the local big box stores to pick up something that might say Linksys on the front, but is it really Linksys on the inside? Network services. Do you really understand where your traffic is going? Is it encrypted the entire way through? Are there jump points? You know, are there places where it gets processed in between? And the Internet of Things. Does your policies cover cell phones, tablets? Does it cover your coffee maker? Does it cover, you know, your printers and scanners and those sort of things that are on your internet? Think about all that. And now that you've had people working from home, how does that flow into their home life as well? What things do they have connected to the network? How could those disrupt your services, or could they do things to you? It's a lot to think about these days, and the world has changed, and it's changed drastically. Our cyber programs need to change for it or with it. I understand I'm running out of time here, so as I said, my name is Clint Walker. I'm from the federal government, and I'm here to help. We offer a plethora of services at DHS, and as Bradford already said, these services are already paid for. There's no charge for anything that we do. We can come out and help you with cyber exercises. We can help you develop playbook. We can facilitate a tabletop exercise with you. We can do, you know, remote assistance. You know, we can help you respond to cyber incidents. The FBI, they're the police officers, they're the ones that are trying to incarcerate, or they're trying to go after the bad guys. DHS, we're the firefighters. We're the ones that are helping you put your networks back together when you go through a cyber incident. We have cybersecurity advisors and protective security advisors. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with here is our cyber assessments. Once again, there's no charge for any of these cyber assessments. We do everything from strategic level assessments, where we can come in and look at your cyber program and compare it to the perfect model and see how you score against your peers. We can do everything to a phishing campaign. We have vulnerability scanning. We have validated architecture design review. And of course, we have penetration testing. All of these services are available to you. All you need to do is give us a call at DHS, schedule a time for us, and we can talk to you in more detail on these, and we're happy to do so. So Bradford, I really appreciate you letting me come and talk today. Is there any questions that you'd like to go over?
Sure, I'm going to shoot this one out. Kind of a generic question. We already asked it to the FBI, but I think the hundreds of people that are still on would probably like to know, when do they call you? Do they call you in an instance of a breach? I know that you've got these fantastic tools that have been paid for already by our taxpayer money, which is important. So many people don't know that all of these tools, especially from CISA, are free. But is there ever a scenario where they just reach out to you aside from getting those tools, like in a case of a breach?
So I always suggest that people, even with the FBI, reach out to us anytime and as often as you can. Building the relationship ahead of time is the most important thing. Teaching us how you actually operate so that when we get called in to do incident response, we already know how you're supposed to look. We can start helping you better. We prefer to work in the cyber preparedness category. So if you're just calling me for advice saying, hey, we're looking at moving from this particular architecture to this particular architecture, do you have any advice, or is there anything that you can do to assist us? Or can you help us? We're trying to come up with a new policy for, remote device management or for telework. We're happy to assist in all of those categories because we'd rather help you before it becomes an issue. But at the very time that you start to notice that there's anomalous activity on your network or within your organization, that's when you call us, because that's when we're going to be the most useful, is we can start getting you in touch with, maybe it might not be our services, but we can get you in touch with vendors or suppliers. We can get you in touch with your ISAC or your information sharing and analysis centers. We can get you in touch with local resources that might be able to assist you in figuring out whether you have a problem or not. Because that's what the issue really comes, is most people don't understand that they have a problem until it becomes a disaster. And if we can start to identify these problems when they're still small, when somebody's still casing the joint, when somebody's still kind of poking and probing to ever keep it from becoming a disaster, that's where we're the most beneficial. So please use and abuse our program. Call us up, send us emails, invite us to come out and visit with you. Whether it's a virtual visit, telephone visit, or in person, we're happy to help.
The two follow-up questions said, there's no size criteria on the business, meaning it could be a small mom and pop, or it could be a 50-person or 500. Obviously, a larger company will certainly have precedence, but is there any kind of size criteria for people to get your tools?
We have no size criteria. Now, we do have limited resources. Right. So, of course, sometimes we have to prioritize. Now, that's why we're bringing on 75 new people in the Cybersecurity Advisor program, is because we are starting to get a large number of people reaching out, trying to get assistance with it. So we're trying to supply more people out there that are able to give that assistance. So we want everyone to call us. We want to talk with everyone. Maybe we can't bring the pen test to all mom and pops, but we can bring something to them to help them, because that small company might be tomorrow's, next big company. That's the way that these things work, is somebody small becomes big overnight. We'd rather have the relationship with them now, help them build a robust program, because once something gets beyond a certain point, it's hard to add security into it. We'd rather help people build security from the ground floor up. We'd help them integrate things now rather than later, because if the breach happens later and you're trying to build security into that's the wrong time to do it.
Sure. An Apple computer was started out of a garage, so yes, small mom and pops do become quite large. Let me just see, I think we have a couple of others coming in here. All right. Has our government taken proactive steps to ensure internet is available, since a significant portion of our economy is now dependent upon the internet? So this is kind of a global question. are there more precautions being taken from a global standpoint from the federal government, that is, to protect our internet structure? Great question.
I think that the internet structure throughout the United States has actually been designed and developed in a way that, you know, everything is redundant. There's lots of different avenues. That doesn't mean that things can't go down. You know, as we saw, I think it was a year and a half ago, where one of the core routers there in the New York area went down. Amazon lost a lot of money over it. All the ISPs, all the companies that, you know, make money off of the internet, of course, are all, you know, on board with monitoring. We have the federal watch floor, so what we call the SIOC, and that's where we monitor all federal networks. We're monitoring the internet itself, and we're working with all the ISPs and the ISACs in order to make sure that as soon as there's an issue, that we have people boots on the ground wherever they need to be in order to get these things up. It's not just the federal government doing it, though. I'd like to point out that it's critical infrastructure and private industry that are doing a majority of the monitoring, and we're assisting them. You know, because nobody wants the federal government to be involved, you know, with, you know, the directly influencing the internet. You know, we're there as an assistance. You know, the internet is what it is, and, you know, that's for everybody.
So the Wild West. All right, we have one last question. How do you compare your security services? This is a great one, with other security services supplied by commercial and private industry? Great question. Is there a difference in, I mean, it's hard to actually quantify that. I mean, I think it's best for you is, what would be the difference in services going, you know, to CISA or private industry?
Well, I'm always going to say that private industry, you know, is going to be better. You know, as you saw, we cover 16 sectors of critical infrastructure. It means all of our assessments, everything that we do is made to be very vanilla, because we have to be able to plug and play in with whatever regulation or whatever standard that industry is using. So we're kind of a very broad, you know, a mile wide, you know, an inch deep kind of assessments or kind of tools that we use. We're looking for, you know, very specific things in what we're trying to do. A vendor or, you know, something like that is going to be able to tailor something to that exact organization. They're going to be able to come in and say, hey, you're in the financial industry, you're using this exact, you know, systems and stuff like that, and they're going to be able to tailor their offerings to you. We are there for people who either don't have a program in order to be able to figure out how to get started, what to do, or we're there to help you validate whether you chose the right vendor. So if you have a vendor that's coming in and they're doing a phishing campaign against you, but you're not really seeing any, you know, you want to find out if your people are actually just being really good at finding that particular vendor's phishing emails, you can bring our phishing program in to help you validate that, yes, we chose the right vendor, or maybe we need a different vendor, or maybe our program's not robust enough. We're that extra piece that comes in to help you either validate or to help you get started. That's what we're there for. We're not here to replace any vendors. Vendors are going to be able to go much deeper than you. And we actually encourage you to reach out to vendors if you know specifically what you want. But most organizations don't know what they need, and they use our services to help them narrow down, especially our strategic level assessments, where we come in and say, look, and I know that they're pitching you on this other thing over here, but where you're really lacking is asset management. You know, why are you trying to put in a SIM solution before you even know what assets you have to put in the SIM solution? Do you really know what you're trying to do? You know, why don't we get started with, you know, the low hanging fruit, and then you can work your way up to the more complex, you know, IT security solutions. So that's really what we're here for, is we're here to help you validate. We're here to help you get started. We're here to help you on a roadmap that will probably include vendors at some point. Although we make no recommendations for specific vendors, we're just saying, hey, this is the kind of service, or this is how you can go farther than what we're able to do. But we're there to help you or to validate.
Great. Hey, Clint, thank you so much. You are certainly an asset to the cybersecurity community, and your division is just wonderful. And again, to share with the audience, the tools are complementary and robust. And I do love the fact that you can actually test the current private security services that might be already being used at a facility or at a company in a Switzerland neutral type of approach, which is great, because, you know, you can't really play favorites there, but you can certainly say, hey, you know, there's a lot of holes in your current infrastructure. And I think that's a wonderful resource. And thank you again. We do have your contact information up. Clint, thank you again. I guess good luck with fighting the crime out there. Stay safe, wash your hands, and thank you again so much for your time. Lucy, if we could put up the final slide with everyone's contact information for our audience, I think that'll be terrific. Thank you again, Clint. And to literally the hundreds of people that have joined us, we do have another one tomorrow, and that is going to be kind of like for the New England region. We've got the U.S. Secret Service doing a keynote, also another speaker, another expert from the Department of Homeland Security, and every month in every major region of the United States, we're going to have these security briefings, which of course are complimentary to all business leadership. And on behalf of my team, thank you so much for joining us. We certainly do, want to go live again with our cybersecurity summits, but we have to embrace the virtual community right now. It is the way to go. And I look forward to your questions and comments. You can certainly do that. Again, we've been getting a lot of questions in terms of the slides. The slides will be shared, and except for the FBI portion, you will have these, in perpetuity. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And let me see if we can get this slide up here. You can go to Cyber Summit USA and get all the contact information from all of our experts. And thank you so very, very much for joining us, and you take care. Bye-bye.